At my grandson's baptism, my daughter prevented me from holding the baby. She's too old. She'll drop the baby. I smiled, embarrassed, and stayed quiet. On Tuesday, I canceled the mortgage check. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The church was filled with soft afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the white baptismal gown my grandson wore. I'd arrived early, my heart fluttering with excitement at finally being able to hold little James. I hadn't been allowed to visit since he was born 3 months ago. Thalia always had an excuse. Too busy, too tired. The baby had a cold. I spotted them near the altar. Thalia, her husband Greg, and baby James, surrounded by Greg's large family. I approached slowly, clutching the silver cross necklace I'd brought as a gift. It had been mine as a child, then Thalia's. Now it would be James. "There's my grandson," I said softly, reaching out. Thalia's eyes narrowed. "Mom, we're in the middle of something." "I just want to hold him for a moment before the ceremony," I said, my hands trembling slightly with anticipation. That's when it happened. Thalia turned to her mother-in-law, Barbara, and handed James to her instead. "Here, take him for a second." I stood there, arms halfway extended, the rejection like a physical slap. "Mom, could you go find us a good seat?" Thalia asked, dismissing me. I nodded, swallowing the hurt, and turned to find a place in the pews. As I walked away, I heard Thalia's voice, pitched just loud enough for me to hear. "She's too old to hold. Him? She'll drop the baby." My cheeks burned with humiliation. I was only 71, not some feeble invalid. My hands were steady enough to tend my garden, to bake the cookies Thalia still accepted when I brought them over. Steady enough to write the mortgage check I sent every month. I smiled, embarrassed, and stayed quiet. That's what I always did. Kept the peace. Didn't make waves. The ceremony passed in a blur. I sat in the third row, alone, watching Greg's extended family crowd around the baptismal font. No one had saved me a spot up front. No one had thought to include me in the family photos afterward. I was an afterthought, if I was thought of at all. At the reception in the church hall, I tried again, approaching Thalia as she stood with a group of young mothers, James cradled in her arms. "He's beautiful," I said, reaching out to stroke his cheek. Thalia shifted away slightly. "Thanks, Mom." "May I hold him now?" I asked, keeping my voice light, hiding my desperation. Thalia hesitated, then looked over my shoulder. "Oh, Rachel wants to see him. Sorry, Mom." She brushed past me, leaving me standing alone again. Throughout the afternoon, I watched as James was passed from person to person. Greg's father, his aunts, even friends who'd never met him before today. But never to me. Each time I approached, Thalia found a reason to move away. As the reception wound down, I made one last attempt. Thalia was alone for a moment, adjusting James's blanket. "Thalia, please. I haven't been able to hold him even once." She looked at me, annoyed. "Mom, not now. He's getting fussy." "Just for a minute," I pleaded. That's when she said it, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Mom?" I said no. "You're too old. Your hands shake. I don't want you to drop him." The conversation around us quieted. I felt eyes on me, pitying, embarrassed. My own daughter, publicly declaring me too incompetent to hold my grandson. I drove home in silence, the hurt too deep for tears. On my kitchen counter sat the checkbook, open to the recently written check for Thalia and Greg's mortgage. The same mortgage I'd been paying for 3 years, ever since they decided they needed a bigger house when Thalia got pregnant. I thought about all I'd given her. The college tuition, the lavish wedding, the down payment on their first house, and now, $2,100 every month for a mortgage on a house I was barely invited to visit. And for what? To be humiliated? to be treated like an inconvenience? I sat at my kitchen table until late into the night, memories washing over me. Thalia as a baby, her tiny fingers gripping mine. Thalia on her first day of school, her backpack almost bigger than she was. Thalia graduating college, the first in our family. I'd worked 2 jobs after her father died to give her everything. I'd gone without so she could have more. Now I lived in my modest home, watching every penny of my fixed income, while my daughter lived in luxury, a luxury I provided but wasn't allowed to share in. Tuesday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I drove to the bank and canceled the mortgage check. Then I called my bank and canceled the automatic payment I'd set up. For the first time in decades, I stood up for myself. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about being treated like a human being, not an ATM. The phone rang that evening. Thalia. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, the bank called. There's some problem with the mortgage payment. Call me back immediately. I didn't. The calls didn't stop. By Thursday, Thalia had left 8 voicemails, each more demanding than the last. I listened to them all but didn't call back. For once, I needed to be strong. I was in my garden, tending to my roses, a simple pleasure Thalia had always found frivolous, when a car screeched into my driveway. The door slammed and Thalia stormed up the path, her face flushed with anger. Mom! What the hell is going on? The mortgage payment bounced. I carefully set my pruning shears down and removed my gardening gloves. Hello, Thalia. It's good to see you too. Don't play games with me. The bank called Greg at work. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for him? Embarrassing. The word hung in the air between us. Did she have any idea what embarrassment really felt like? I canceled the payment, I said simply. She stared at me, momentarily speechless. You? What? Why would you do that? I think you know why. Thalia's eyes narrowed. Is this about the baptism? Are you seriously that petty? I flinched, at her words but stood my ground. It's not petty to want to be treated with basic respect, Thalia. So you're punishing me financially because I didn't let you hold the baby? He was fussy. It wasn't a good time. He wasn't too fussy for Barbara to hold, or Rachel, or any of the dozen other people you let hold him. I kept my voice steady. But that's not even the point. You humiliated me. You told everyone I was too old and shaky to be trusted with my own grandson. Thalia rolled her eyes. I was just being careful with my baby. You're overreacting. Am I? When was the last time you visited me without asking for something, Thalia? When was the last time you called just to check on me? She shifted uncomfortably. I've been busy with the baby. And before that? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your bank? That's not fair. You offered to help with the mortgage. You said you wanted to. Yes, I did. Because I love you. But love goes both ways, Thalia. And respect should, too. She crossed her arms, defensive. So what now? You're just going to let us lose our house because your feelings are hurt? The casualness with which she dismissed my pain was the final confirmation I needed. I'd been right to do this. You and Greg make good money. You can afford your mortgage. We have a baby now. One income. We can't just— I raised you on one income, I interrupted quietly. After your father died when you were 4, I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. Thalia faltered. This was territory we rarely discussed. Her father, my late husband Edward, had died of a heart attack when Thalia was young. She barely remembered him. That was different, she muttered. Yes, it was. I was 29 with a 4-year-old and no college degree. You're 35 with a partner and 2 master's degrees between you. I walked over to the porch swing and sat down, suddenly feeling every one of my 71 years. Do you know what I gave up for you, Thalia? Do you have any idea? She shifted uncomfortably. Mom, don't start with the guilt trip. It's not a guilt trip. It's the truth. I patted the seat beside me. After a moment's hesitation, she sat down, leaving a conspicuous gap between us. After your father died, I was offered a promotion at the bank. Assistant manager. Better pay, better hours. But it would have meant moving to Cincinnati. You never told me that. Because you were settled here. You had just started school, made friends. You were already dealing with losing your father. I couldn't uproot you. I looked down at my hands. The hands my daughter thought too frail to hold her child. So I turned it down, took a second job waiting tables at night instead. Mrs. Peterson from next door would watch you until I got home at midnight. Thalia was quiet, her eyes fixed on the garden. When you wanted to go to that expensive summer camp, I picked up weekend shifts too. When you needed braces, I sold my mother's silver. When you got into Northwestern, I took out a second mortgage to cover what your scholarships didn't. I never asked you to do those things, Thalia said, but her voice had lost its edge. No, you didn't have to ask. That's what mothers do. They sacrifice. I turned to look at her directly. But sacrifice doesn't mean being taken for granted. Thalia, it doesn't mean being treated like I don't matter. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Then her phone chimed with a text, and the moment was gone. It's Greg, she said, reading the message. He wants to know what's happening with the money. Of course he did. Greg had never worked a day in his life that his family connections hadn't paved the way for. He'd expected Thalia to quit her job when the baby came, even though she'd been the higher earner. Traditional values, he'd said. I'd offered to help with the mortgage so Thalia would have options. Instead, it had just enabled Greg's expectations. Tell Greg I'm no longer paying your mortgage, I said firmly. And I won't be providing any other financial support either. Thalia's head snapped up. What? Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious. It's time for you and Greg to stand on your own feet. But what about James, your grandson? Don't you care about his future? It was a low blow, using the baby I wasn't allowed to hold against me. I love James, and I'll always be here for him. But paying your bills isn't the same as being a grandmother. Thalia stood up abruptly. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything, you're just cutting us off? I'm not cutting you off, Thalia. I'm just not funding a lifestyle where I'm not respected or included. She stared at me, her expression, a mixture of disbelief and mounting panic. So that's it? You're choosing money over your family? No, I said softly. I'm choosing self-respect. There's a difference. Talia's face hardened. Fine, have it your way. But don't expect to see James anytime soon. The threat hit its mark, but I forced myself to remain calm. That's your choice. But remember, Thalia, relationships work both ways. When you're ready to treat me like your mother instead of your ATM, my door is always open. She stormed back to her car without another word. As she pulled away, tires spitting gravel, I remained on the porch swing, gently rocking back and forth. For the first time in decades, I had stood my ground. It hurt. Oh, how it hurt. But beneath the pain was something else. A small, fragile sense of pride, of self-worth. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. Things would never be the same again. 2 weeks passed without a word from Thalia. I tried to fill my days with gardening, book club meetings, and volunteering at the senior center, but the silence weighed heavily on my heart. Every time the phone rang, I jumped, hoping it might be her. It never was. On Sunday afternoon, I was reading in my sunroom when I heard a car door slam. Looking out the window, I saw Greg's silver SUV in my driveway. My heart raced as I watched Thalia emerge from the passenger side, her face set in a cold expression. Greg followed, looking equally determined. I took a deep breath and smoothed. My cardigan. This confrontation had been inevitable. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find them standing shoulder to shoulder, a united front. "May we come in?" Greg asked, his voice formal and stiff. I stepped aside. "Of course." They walked into my living room but remained standing. No baby, I noticed with a pang. They hadn't brought James. "We need to talk about the financial situation," Greg said without preamble. "This can't continue." I gestured to the couch. "Please, sit down." They exchanged glances before reluctantly taking seats. I settled into my armchair across from them, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremor. "Mom," Thalia began, her voice carefully controlled. "We've had to dip into our savings to cover the mortgage this month. That's not sustainable." "I understand that must be difficult," I said calmly. Greg leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, with all due respect, I don't think you do understand. We bought that house based on your commitment to help with the payments." "I don't recall signing any agreement to that effect," I replied. His face reddened. "It was a verbal agreement, a promise." "A promise based on mutual respect," I countered, "which seems to be in short supply lately." Thalia's composure cracked. "Is this still about the baptism? Mom, you're being ridiculous." "Am I? When was the last time you invited me over to see James? When was the last time you called just to chat, not to ask for money?" "We've been busy with the baby," Thalia exclaimed. "Too busy for a phone call? Too busy to let your mother hold her grandson even once?" Thalia looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Greg stepped in. "Look, Mrs. Bennett, whatever issues you and Thalia have, they shouldn't affect our financial arrangement." I studied my son-in-law carefully. Greg had always been polite to me, but there was always an undercurrent of condescension in his manner, as if he were humoring a child. "Greg, let me ask you something. How would you feel if your parents were treated the way I've been treated? Excluded from your child's life, publicly humiliated, only contacted when money is needed?" He shifted uncomfortably. "That's different. My parents are younger, wealthier, more worthy of respect." "That's not what I meant," he muttered. "Then what did you mean?" I pressed. Thalia interrupted. "Mom, we didn't come here to talk about feelings. We came to discuss the mortgage." Her dismissal of my emotions, relegating them to mere feelings, struck a nerve. For decades, I'd suppressed my own needs for hers. I'd worked overtime shifts when I was exhausted so she could have dance lessons. I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner so she could have new clothes for school. I'd postponed retirement to help with her wedding costs. And now my hurt wasn't even worth discussing. "Thalia," I said quietly, "do you remember when you were 16 and crashed the car? The one I'd saved for years to buy?" She frowned at the apparent change of subject. "What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember what you said to me when I got to the scene of the accident?" She looked away. "No," you said. "The car can be replaced, but I can't be. Aren't you glad I'm okay?" And you were right. You were more important than any car, than anything. I leaned forward. "But that works both ways, Thalia. I'm more than just a checkbook. I'm a person, your mother, and I deserve to be treated like one." Greg cleared his throat impatiently. "Mrs. Bennett, with all due respect." "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "You've had your say. Now I'll have mine." I stood up, drawing myself to my full height. "For years I've been your safety net, your fallback plan, the one who makes everything easier, and I did it gladly because that's what mothers do." My voice grew stronger with each word. "But I won't be treated like a servant, or an ATM, or someone too old and useless to be trusted with her own grandson." Thalia's eyes widened at my uncharacteristic assertiveness. "I've made my decision. I will not resume the mortgage payments. I will not give you any more money until our relationship changes." Greg stood up abruptly. "This is extortion." "No," I said calmly. "This is a boundary. Something I should have established long ago. Thalia jumped to her feet, tears of frustration in her eyes. So that's it? You're just going to let us struggle? You're not struggling, Thalia. You have a beautiful home, 2 cars, and enough designer clothes to fill a boutique. You might have to cut back on luxuries, but you won't starve. We might lose the house, she exclaimed. Then you'll find a smaller one. Like I did after your father died, life goes on. Greg put his arm around Thalia's shoulders. Come on, honey. This is obviously going nowhere. As they headed toward the door, Thalia turned back, her final weapon at the ready. Don't expect to see James anytime soon. If you don't care enough to help us keep a roof over his head, why should you get to be part of his life? The words cut deep, exactly as she'd intended. But I stood firm. That's your choice. But remember, Thalia, someday James will ask why he never knew his grandmother. What will you tell him? For a brief moment, doubt flickered across her face. Then Greg tugged her arm, and they were gone. I sank back into my chair, trembling from head to toe. I'd done it. After a lifetime of giving, of making peace at my own expense, I'd finally stood up for myself. The house felt emptier than ever as their car pulled away. The silence was deafening. I knew what lay ahead. Lonely days and sleepless nights, worrying about a grandson I might never get to know. But for the first time in years, despite the pain, I also felt something else. The quiet dignity of self-respect. Evening fell. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never go back to being invisible again. A month after the confrontation, autumn arrived, painting the neighborhood in brilliant reds and golds. I watched the seasons change from my kitchen window, feeling the passage of time more acutely than ever. My 72nd birthday came and went without a call from Thalia. The silence had solidified into a wall between us. I'd kept my word. No more checks, no more financial bailouts. And she'd kept hers. No more contact, no access to James. Every day I fought the urge to give in, to call her and say I'd resume the payments. The thought of my grandson growing up without knowing me gnawed at my heart. But each time I weakened, I remembered the look on Thalia's face at the baptism, the casual cruelty of her dismissal. If I surrendered now, nothing would change. On a crisp Saturday morning, I was raking leaves when a familiar voice called out, "You're going to hurt your back doing that, Colleen." I turned to see Martha Wilson walking up my driveway, a covered dish in her hands. Martha and I had taught at the same elementary school before retirement, but we'd drifted apart over the years. "Martha, what brings you by?" She held up the dish. "Pumpkin bread and curiosity. Haven't seen you at church coffee hour lately." I leaned on my rake, suddenly aware of how isolated I'd become. "It's been a difficult few months." Martha nodded, her eyes kind. "I heard about the situation with Thalia. Small town, big gossip." My cheeks burned. "What exactly did you hear?" "That you cut her off financially and now she's keeping the baby from you." Martha shrugged. "But I know there's always more to the story." I hesitated, then gestured toward the porch. "Would you like some coffee with that pumpkin bread?" An hour later, Martha sat across from me at my kitchen table, listening as I poured out the whole story. The years of one-sided giving, the humiliation at the baptism, the ultimatum. "You did the right thing," she said when I finished. "And I don't say that lightly. Then why does it feel so awful?" My voice cracked. Martha reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Because you're a mother, and mothers are programmed to put their children first, even when it's not healthy." "I miss James," I whispered. "I've only seen him twice, and now I might never know him." "Thalia can't keep him from you forever," Martha said. Eventually she'll realize what she's doing. And if she doesn't? Martha's expression grew serious. Then you'll have to decide if your self-respect is worth the price. But remember, Colleen, giving in now won't fix what's broken. It'll just teach Thalia that she can control you with her child. After Martha left, I found myself standing in the small room I'd prepared for James. A cheerful space with a crib I'd found at a garage sale, and restored myself. Shelves filled with children's books, and a rocking chair by the window. I'd painted clouds on the ceiling and hung colorful mobiles, all for a grandson who might never sleep here. I sat in the rocking chair, fighting back tears. The house felt so empty. Thalia had been my whole world for so long. Without her, without James, who was I? The question lingered as days turned into weeks. Martha began stopping by regularly, sometimes with baked goods, sometimes just for company. She dragged me to the senior center for Tai Chi classes, introduced me to her book club, insisted I join her for weekly walks in the park. You need a life beyond Thalia, she told me bluntly. You had one before she was born. You can have one again. Slowly, I began to emerge from my isolation. I volunteered at the library's children's hour, reading to toddlers whose bright eyes and infectious laughter soothed the ache of missing James. I joined a gardening club and discovered a talent for nurturing rare orchids. I even took a watercolor class at the community college, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for while raising Thalia. As Thanksgiving approached, Martha invited me to join her family for dinner. My son and his wife are coming. From Chicago with their kids. They'd love to meet you. I hesitated. I don't want to intrude on family time. Martha fixed me with a stern look. Colleen Bennett, you are not spending Thanksgiving alone, watching the Macy's parade and eating a frozen dinner. I won't allow it. That's how I found myself, on Thanksgiving Day, seated at Martha's crowded table, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her grandson, Tyler, was only a few months older than James, and when he reached for me with chubby hands, I felt a bittersweet joy as I held him. You're a natural, Martha's daughter-in-law commented, watching me bounce Tyler on my knee. I've had some practice, I said softly, thinking of the brief moments I'd held Thalia as a baby, how perfectly she'd fit in my arms. After dinner, as we sat in Martha's living room drinking coffee, my phone rang. It was Thalia. My heart jumped to my throat. Excuse me, I murmured, stepping into the hallway to take the call. Hello? Mom. Her voice was tight. I just wanted to say Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Thalia. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too. I waited, wondering if there was more. So, how are you? She asked awkwardly. I'm well. I'm having dinner with a friend and her family. I paused. How is James? He's fine. Her tone cooled. Getting big, starting to crawl. My heart ached at missing these milestones. That's wonderful. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, Thalia spoke again. Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe you could come see James sometime. Just a short visit. Hope flared in my chest. I'd like that very much. But we need to talk about the financial situation first, she added quickly. Things are tight, Mom. Really tight. And there it was. Not a genuine olive branch, but a negotiation. Visit rights in exchange for resuming payments. My newfound resolve wavered. Would it be so wrong to give in? To secure a place in my grandson's life, even if it meant being used again? Martha's words echoed in my mind. Giving in now won't fix. What's broken? Thalia, I said carefully. I'd love to see James, but my financial decision stands. The two aren't connected. Her voice hardened. They are for me. If you care about your grandson, you'll help us keep our home. I do care about James, I said, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. but I also care about having a real relationship with you, not one based on financial dependency." "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." The line went dead. I stood in Martha's hallway, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. When I returned to the living room, Martha took one look at me and understood. She came over and hugged me tightly. "She called to negotiate, not to reconcile," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Colleen." "Did I do the right thing? Saying no?" Martha looked me in the eyes. "Only you can answer that. But I will say this. You look healthier than I've seen you in years. There's a light in your eyes that wasn't there before. Whatever you're doing, it's helping you find yourself again." As I drove home that night, I thought about Martha's words. The pain of Thalia's rejection was still acute, but something else had emerged alongside it. A growing sense of self-worth, of possibility. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself, not just as Thalia's mother or James's grandmother, but as Colleen. And despite everything, that felt like a step forward. Winter gave way to spring, and still no word from Thalia. I'd settled into a new routine: Tai Chi on Mondays, volunteering at the library on Wednesdays, lunch with Martha on Fridays. My watercolor paintings had improved enough that the community center asked to display them in their annual art show. For my 72nd birthday, Martha and my new friends from the gardening club threw me a surprise party. Life went on, even with the Thalia-shaped hole in my heart. Then, on a rainy April afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Martha was visiting her sister in Florida, and my book club meeting had been canceled due to the weather. I opened the door to find Thalia standing on my porch, soaking wet, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Thalia, what's wrong?" I stepped aside to let her in. She entered hesitantly, water dripping from her raincoat onto my entryway floor. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice breaking. I guided her to the living room and helped her out of her wet coat. "Let me get you a towel. Are you hurt? Is James okay?" "James is fine. He's with Greg's mother." She sank onto the couch, looking utterly defeated. I brought her a towel and a cup of hot tea, sitting beside her with a respectable distance between us. "Tell me what's happened." Thalia stared into her teacup, avoiding my eyes. "Everything's falling apart, Mom. Greg lost his job 3 weeks ago. Oh, Thalia, I'm so sorry. His father tried to get him another position at the firm, but there were ethics violations or something. Nobody will hire him in this town." She wiped her eyes. "And I can't go back to work because no one's hiring in my field right now, and daycare costs a fortune." I listened, letting her talk. "We missed 2 mortgage payments. The bank sent a final notice yesterday." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. "We're going to lose the house, Mom." My heart ached for her, despite everything. "What does Greg say about all this?" Thalia's face crumpled. "That's the other thing. We've been fighting constantly. He's drinking too much, staying out late. Last night, he said." She trailed off, her voice catching. "Said what?" "He said this was all my fault, that if I hadn't alienated you, we'd still have your support. He said I should have been nicer to you, let you see James more." She laughed bitterly. "Not because it was the right thing to do, but because we needed your money." I sat perfectly still, absorbing her words. "And what do you think?" She shrugged, miserably. "I think he's right. I've messed everything up." Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say it would all be okay, to write a check and fix everything like I always had. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger these past months, knew better. "Why are you here, Thalia?" I asked gently. "What do you want from me?" She looked up, startled by my directness. I need help, Mom." "Financial help?" She nodded, dropping her gaze back to her tea. "We need $14,000 to catch up on the mortgage and keep the bank from foreclosing." "I see." I took a deep breath. "And if I provided that money, what then?" Would I be allowed to see James? To be part of your lives? Thalia flinched at my tone. Of course. I know I've been terrible to you. I can see that now. Can you? I leaned forward. Thalia, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to meet mine. I love you. I have always loved you from the moment I knew you existed. And nothing, not distance, not hurt feelings, not even your rejection, could ever change that. Her lower lip trembled. But I won't be used anymore, I continued. I won't have a relationship with you that's based on what I can provide financially. That's not what this is, she protested weakly. Isn't it? You're here because you need money. If you didn't, would you be sitting on my couch right now? She had no answer. How many times have you picked up the phone to call me, just to check how I'm doing? How many times have you thought about bringing James over? Not because you needed something, but because a grandson should know his grandmother. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I've made a mess of everything, she whispered. Not everything, I said, softening my tone. But yes, you've hurt me deeply, and you've deprived James of a relationship with someone who loves him very much. I know, she said, her voice small. I reached out and took her hand. It was the first time we'd touched in months. I will help you, Thalia, but not in the way you're asking. Her fingers tightened around mine. What do you mean? I won't give you $14,000 to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford, but I will help you find a more affordable place to live. I'll help you look for work. I'll watch James while you go to interviews, so you don't have to pay for childcare. Her expression was a mixture of disappointment and confusion. You're saying no to the money? I'm saying yes to being your mother, not your bank. Thalia pulled her hand away. We can't just downsize, Mom. What will people think? All our friends live in that neighborhood. What people think doesn't pay the mortgage, I said gently. And friends who only value you for your address aren't real friends. She stood up abruptly. I knew this was a mistake. You're punishing me. No, Thalia. I'm refusing to enable behavior. That isn't good for either of us. I remained seated, maintaining my calm. You and Greg are living beyond your means, relying on others to fill the gaps. That's not sustainable, and it's not healthy. So you're just going to let us become homeless? Her voice rose with indignation. You won't be homeless. There are plenty of nice apartments in this town, or you could consider moving somewhere with a lower cost of living. This is my home. James's home. Home is where your family is, Thalia. Not a specific house. She grabbed her still damp coat. I should have known you wouldn't help. You don't care about us at all. The accusation stung, but I held firm. I care enough to not throw money at a problem that money can't fix. I care enough to offer real help instead of a temporary bailout. Keep your help, she snapped, heading for the door. We'll figure this out on our own. I followed her. Thalia, please, don't leave like this. She paused at the door, her back to me. You know what the worst part is? Greg was right. I should have been nicer to you, not because it was right, but because we needed you. What kind of person does that make me? Before I could answer, she was gone, the door slamming behind her. I sank into my armchair, emotionally drained. Had I done the right thing? Or had I just pushed my daughter further away when she needed me most? The phone rang at 10 p.m. I answered, immediately, expecting Thalia. Instead, it was Barbara, Greg's mother. Colleen, I need you to come to the hospital. It's Thalia. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is she hurt? No, nothing like that. She's having a breakdown. Greg brought James to me earlier, said he couldn't handle both the baby and Thalia. Then the hospital called. She checked herself in. She's asking for you. I was already reaching for my car keys. I'm on my way. The hospital corridors were quiet at that late hour, my footsteps echoing against the sterile walls as I followed a nurse to the psychiatric ward. I'd never seen Thalia in a place like this. The thought terrified me. When I entered, her room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, her usual polish completely gone. "Thalia," I said softly. She turned, her red-rimmed eyes focusing on me. "Mom, you came." Of course I came. I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "What happened, sweetheart?" She shook her head, as if trying to clear it. "I don't know. After I left your house, I just broke. I was driving and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I pulled over and just sat there, crying for hours." She looked down at her hands. I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore, who I've become, what I've done. I waited, giving her space to continue. I drove to Barbara's to check on James, but Greg was there. He was angry, said I was making a scene. We fought. Again. She swallowed hard. I left and just kept driving, ended up here. Oh, Thalia. The doctor says it's acute anxiety and depression. They want me to stay a few days. I nodded. Whatever. You need. She looked at me, really looked at me for what felt like the first time in years. Why are you being so kind? After everything I've done? Because I'm your mother. That doesn't stop, even when things are hard. Her face crumpled. I've been awful to you. So awful. Using James as leverage. Treating you like an ATM. Humiliating. You at the baptism. Yes, I said quietly. You have. I don't know why. It's like, somewhere along the way, I started seeing you as an obstacle. Or a resource. Not as my mom. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm so ashamed. I took her hand. We've both made mistakes, Thalia. Me by enabling behaviors that weren't healthy. You by taking advantage of that. But we can start again. How? Everything's such a mess. The house, Greg, my marriage. I don't know what to do. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. She leaned against me then, her head on my shoulder like when she was small. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know, I said, stroking her hair. I know. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, conversations with doctors, and caring for James while Thalia received treatment. Barbara helped when she could, but Greg was notably absent, having moved in with a friend after another argument with Thalia. James was a delight, 9 months old now, crawling everywhere, babbling constantly. I'd missed so much of his life already. But as I rocked him to sleep each night in my spare room, singing the same lullabies I'd once sung to Thalia, I felt a bittersweet joy. Sometimes healing comes from unexpected places. When Thalia was released from the hospital 5 days later, she came to stay with me. Just until I figure things out, she said uncertainly, standing in my doorway with a small suitcase. Stay as long as you need, I told her, welcoming her home. The first weeks were awkward, both of us tiptoeing around old hurts, learning how to be mother and daughter again. We argued sometimes, old patterns die hard, but we also talked. Really, talked in a way we hadn't in years. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing watching the sunset, James asleep inside, Thalia turned to me. Greg wants to reconcile. He says he'll get help for his drinking, find a new job. I kept my expression neutral. What do you want? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Part of me thinks I should try for James's sake. But another part knows you deserve better, I finished. She nodded. We lost the house. The bank foreclosed last week. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm not, strangely enough. She looked surprised at her own words. It was never really our house. It was a status symbol, something to show off, not a home. I squeezed her hand. You'll make a real home wherever you go. That's just it. I don't know where to go from here. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what you said, about moving somewhere with a lower cost of living, starting fresh. Oh? I tried to keep the hope from my voice. There's a teaching position open in Burlington, elementary school art teacher. She glanced at me. I've always loved art. It's what I studied before Greg convinced me to switch to business. Burlington? Vermont? She nodded. It's beautiful there. Good schools for James, affordable housing. She hesitated. But it's so far from here. From you. I thought about my life these past months, the friends I'd made, the activities I'd come to enjoy, the sense of self I'd rediscovered. And I thought about Thalia and James, the family I'd almost lost. What if, I said slowly, I came with you? Thalia's eyes widened. You'd do that? Leave your home? Your friends? Home is where your family is, remember? And real friends can be visited. I smiled. Besides, I hear Vermont has excellent gardening clubs. Tears filled her eyes. But what about your life here? You've built something for yourself. I have, and that's important. But so are you and James. I looked out at the twilight settling over my garden. I'm not suggesting we live together. That wouldn't be healthy for either of us. But nearby? Close enough for Sunday dinners and bedtime stories for James? That sounds pretty wonderful to me. Thalia leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture that had become frequent since her hospital stay. You'd really start over at 72? Life is full of new beginnings at any age. I chuckled. Besides, I hear the fall colors in Vermont are spectacular. I could paint them. 1 year later, I stood in my new kitchen in Burlington, arranging freshly baked cookies on a plate. Through the window, I could see the brilliant autumn foliage on the mountains in the distance. My watercolors of the landscape adorned the walls of my small but charming cottage, just 3 blocks from Thalia's apartment. The doorbell rang, and I smiled, knowing who it would be. Sunday dinner had become our tradition. Thalia stood on the porch. James, now a boisterous toddler, balanced on her hip. We brought wine, she said, holding up a bottle. And I made lasagna, I replied, stepping aside to let them in. James wiggled down and ran to me, arms outstretched. Gamma, up! I scooped him up, savoring the feel of his solid little body against mine, his chubby arms around my neck. Hello, my sweet boy. Did you have a good week at daycare? As he babbled his toddler tales, Thalia moved around my kitchen with familiar ease, uncorking the wine, setting the table, adding final touches to the salad she'd brought. I got the promotion, she said casually, though I could see the pride in her eyes. Full-time art teacher starting next semester. Thalia, that's wonderful. I hugged her with my free arm, James still clinging to my neck. It means I can finally afford a bigger place. There's a little house for rent near the elementary school. 2 bedrooms with a yard for James to play in. That sounds perfect. She hesitated. It's actually right around the corner from you. Is that too close? I don't want you to feel crowded. I laughed. Darling, after a year of seeing you several times a week, I think we've proven we can manage healthy boundaries. It hadn't been easy, this rebuilding. There had been hard conversations, tears, even a few setbacks. Greg had made half-hearted attempts at reconciliation before finally agreeing to an amicable divorce. Thalia had gone back to therapy, working, through her issues with money, status, and self-worth. And I had learned to be a mother without being a martyr, to love without losing myself, to give without being taken advantage of. As we sat down to dinner, James in his booster seat between us, Thalia raised her glass, to new beginnings, I smiled, clinking my glass against hers, and to knowing our worth. James banged his sippy cup on the table, making us both laugh. Outside, the Vermont sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, a canvas more beautiful than anything I could capture in watercolor. But inside, in this moment of simple family, joy was the masterpiece I'd been waiting for all along. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.